Hi, everybody. It's Mary Davidson here, one of your co hosts. And in today's episode, we are talking all about event strategy, where to start when planning your event. We're really excited to get into these questions that we receive from you, and we've created a full episode about it. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm Logan Clements, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson. And before we jump into this week's episode, all about event strategy, we've talked about Northstar some. We're going to get more into the strategy piece. But Mary, we've got a conversation starter. We're getting to June. It's right around the corner. Summer is almost here. What is something that you're looking forward to this summer?
I wish I had like an exciting answer, but genuinely, remember, we live in Washington and Seattle, and I am just looking forward to the sun. Like sitting outside in the sun is like everything that I want right now. I got this like giant duck floaty thing, and you better believe we have this like pond thing in our backyard. I don't know how to describe it. And I'm going to put that floaty in there and just sit. And it's going to be the best. I'll share a picture when I have that moment this
You'll
summer.
have to.
It'll be great. Logan, what about you? What are you looking forward to this summer?
Now I'm feeling like it should be something like personal fun, but the thing I'm the most excited for this summer is going to work at the Olympics. Listeners on this podcast know that I'm super passionate about the Olympics. It's a dream of mine. This will be my second Olympic Games. My first one was Tokyo in 2021, but it was under some pretty strict COVID restrictions. So I will still say it was an Olympic experience, but I don't think to the full extent. And so I have just been so excited. And Mary, my credential came in the mail the other day, because credentials and accreditation, it's like very high security for the Olympics, but I have to remember now where I put it so that I don't forget, because I don't need it for another couple weeks before I fly. So I'm very excited to have it. I have a credential, so meaning it's real, it's happening. But now I'm just a little anxious that I'm going to lose it between now and then.
Oh my gosh, don't lose it. But I'm so glad that you said that. Like that is the most exciting thing. I feel like I'm really excited for you. So we're all going to live vicariously through you. All right. I think we're definitely ready for what's to come in summer. But before we get into our topic today, which we are excited about, as always, we want to make sure that we plug our new Better Events community. This is a paid community on Substack. You get access to bonus content episodes. You'll get access to our Discord channel. We're going to do quarterly virtual meetups and other things. And so please consider it if you've enjoyed any of our podcasts thus far. We're excited to bring the community together. So do check out our community, and the information is in the show notes. And so with that, we're going to get into our episode. We chose this topic today, event strategy, where to start when planning your event, because these came in from some listener questions. We kind of combined two listener questions together, which created this episode. We thought it would be enough to fill a full episode, and we are really piggybacking off of episode 2, which is pretty crazy if you think about it, because this is episode 157, and we're throwing it back to episode 2, which was starting with why and finding your event North Star. And this is basically the next step after you find why, or you establish your why in your event North Star, then what? And that is the purpose of today's episode. So as you all know, we like to start at the beginning. So Logan, I'm going to ask you, after you start with why, from there, what do you personally do? What priorities do you focus on next?
Yeah, so I will say, Mary, I used to do more full planning. I think when we were planning this episode, I was reflecting that I was like, I do a lot more that's just one piece now. So I'm really focused on production, whether it's virtual, in person, and your stage presentation, your content that's going to be, what folks are focusing on has really become my focus. So I guess this would be the details that I would need as a vendor that is a part of your event, is once you've figured out your why. The big thing for me would be the date and the location. because both of those would determine if I, as a vendor, your production person, your producer, if I'm available and or interested in whatever location this is. And I think that can look a little different for everybody because sometimes there's certain vendors you want to work with. So maybe you want to reach out to your vendors first to figure out when they're available and you have flexibility on your date. So that's why I'm saying it like, and like location, if you know the city, but maybe you haven't found the venue. Those two details, though, are needed to officially book most vendors, whether it's a production person, your registration, your photographer, whatever. Your venue is definitely going to need to know the date. So I feel like starting to figure out what your parameters are for date and venue would be really important. And then you'd be able to get your other key priorities because you know your why. So if your why is really important to have a really interactive experience for your attendees in a somewhere different, shake it up from where you've been, then maybe your venue is going to be your step number 2. And you're going to be flexible on when it is because you really want this cool out of the box venue. Or maybe you're somebody who had a really stressful event experience the year before and you're like, we need to hire a planner. We need to hire a Mary, an EP events, a somebody to come in and do it. So maybe you're actually your next step before you know your date, your venue is going to go to the planner and be like, hey, when are you available? I just find it's hard. You can't really line up all of those pieces without your location and your date. You can start to have those conversations, but those would be my priority. Start figuring out, use your why to figure out your when and your where. But Mary, how about you? You do more full planning than I do. So what would your priorities be?
I think what you pointed out is super important, and it's also challenging because there are a lot of things that are happening kind of at the same time. And so I'm gonna go, I guess, like, pretty granular, and, like, when I personally, as a planner, like, we establish the why, some, like, other, like, key things we do, and this is all honestly kind of part of the kickoff calls still, is to, like, just recap, like, what happened last year so we all are on the same page about what needs to happen this year. Because that, I think, automatically can build out the next steps sometimes. And then, also just talking through, like, your process, making sure you're on the same page with your process. Like, how often are you meeting? What's the cadence? What's your workflow? Where are things coming from? Like, all of that. So I know that's, like, really granular, but, like, those are the key things that, like, I need to make sure we're on the same page with, and then from there, I can start, getting what I need to work with the vendors and the venues and things like that. So that's what I would say we do. But for someone who is involved in other components of the event, even then we both have mentioned, like, if you have more of a back end involvement in an event, at this time, I think you should be focusing on, like, the theme of the event, the messaging of the event, like, because that's going to influence, like, a lot of things moving forward as well. So start having those conversations with your committees and your key stakeholders to make sure that, like, we're on board with the theme. And then depending on what your event is, this is also when I think you need to start, you need your date, like Logan said, and then from there you need to start your branding so that you can then start event materials, so that you can do save the dates, that you can get sponsors regardless of your kind of event, or community partners. Like, it all just kind of builds up. And so I understand why this is a question and a topic that was sent in, because a lot of things do work off each other. And it is this, like, domino effect for sure. And so depending on the parties, I think that there are multiple things going on at the same time. Our coming questions are going to even answer this further. But Logan, is there
Yeah.
anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I mean, that's what makes, event planning so stressful because it is truly that you have to start multiple things at once. You need to be you are doing your programming while you're also trying to start your marketing, while you're starting your sponsorship, while you're starting your other vendors and design, decor, some of the catering, the fun stuff. Those are all things that kind of have to happen at the same time. But that is why I think our episode 2 has been so popular, because the North Star and the why is really where you can do your meet. That also, I think, helps you define your who. I'm just thinking, like, Mary, when we started the Better Events Conference, the venue, the like where and the when were the two that we were like, before we can even launch a save the date or launch sponsor outreach or launch all these things, it was like, if we have those two pieces of information, then that can kickstart a lot, and the rest of the details will kind of fill it in. And that's one I know I personally struggle with as a producer. If someone approaches me and they don't know their date or their date's moving, it makes it a lot harder for us to nail down a scope of work and nail down exactly who is involved from my side if you don't know the date. But yes, I agree with you. I think there's so many so many things that go into it. But Mary, you kind of alluded to, you have your kickoff call and things like that. But what are some tools or strategies that you like to use to figure out what to prioritize when it comes to event planning? And does it change depending on the event?
Yeah, for us specifically, I think this could change based on how everybody does their event stuff, but I do think it varies. Like I've tried to create templates around this, and this is a point that always gives me just a little bit of not grief, but like I haven't found something that's like universal for every event that we're a part of. I think that's because our scopes are different. They're customized based on every single event. So a lot of times we're coming in to an event and they already have their venue and they're already well along the way with their vendors. And so like that shifts a little bit. Or they haven't started anything and they don't even have a date. And so like those next steps will vary based on those things. But yes, you could say that there are set things that you know where to pick off from because there is this, set schedule that you just always use. So as far as tools and strategies, I would say that having a work pack schedule or a timeline or something that is a template is always going to help you. Like it'll just give you a reminder and oversight of the things that you typically are going to be working on at certain times. That's a wonderful place to start. It's probably the number one place I would suggest starting. If you don't have something like that and you're always recreating the process, that's where I would suggest that you start. I think that's one of the best tools that can be tied into a project management software or some system that can like help you track things like that you can like duplicate lists, for example. Like I don't think you have to go in and remake an Excel spreadsheet every event. There's a lot of duplication things that you can do depending on the platform that you're using. So I guess that would be another tip that I would offer. But yes, I think the priorities do change per event. Logan, what would you add to that?
Yeah, especially if you're an external planner. I think if you're internal and you do the exact same events every year, you might, have parts of this that don't apply to you. But I'm aligned with you, Mary. I have so many different clients who need so many different things. But my two tools I always use now, and it's ironic. I actually was looking because of this episode. I don't have a formal work back schedule anymore. I used to keep it, but because everybody was so custom, I use ClickUp, which you got me into, and I made a template for an event that just has personally me as a vendor, my pre-event process and my onboarding and my post-event process. And that is like just outline when I say that, that's like make proposal, send proposal, proposal confirmed, make deposit invoice, receive deposit invoice, like all of those pre and post tasks I have templated. And then I just duplicate that anytime I have an event, drop in the different deadlines, delete non-relevant tasks. And then I add the custom deadlines, tasks, and things that need to happen because my scope is so different with everyone, like you mentioned, Mary. And then my other one, similar to what you said, was that I always have like a production book or a workbook, which is an Excel document that's shareable and just has a bunch of tabs. And then I've done enough events now that I can go and like duplicate a tab from a different project if if it is relevant. But for me, it's mainly with production. It's like, a key details and links tab. I've had some projects where people love links on links on links. So I had feedback from a freelancer a couple years ago that I need one place for everything to live. And I've stuck to that. So that's like my who, what, when, where, why. Every link you possibly could need lives in that document. And then it usually has a tab for like the team and the run a show. And then I build out other tabs from there from like other elements of the event process. But I think my caveat where I was losing time was if I just duplicate a whole project or if I have like an event that I did last year, I don't just duplicate everything I used the year before. I start with that workbook because you want to be evolving and changing and getting better. And you might realize that you didn't need some of those old documents, or you're going to try a different format or something else. And I was finding when I created this whole folder of all these subfolders and things, I didn't end up using them. So I would say whatever works for you for how you track things. That's what ClickUp has turned into me because I used to have it live as a tab in my workbook, but now I have my workbook is my home place for everything. And then I put tasks into ClickUp because that just helps me as someone who manages multiple different events, multiple different clients at once, have one place I can go that tells me, oh yeah, I told that person I would send them this YouTube link tomorrow, or I would set this thing up for them tomorrow. And I can see it all in one spot.
Yeah, there's two things I wanted to add that you prompted for me is yes, the workbook. I'm so glad you said that. We also use the workbook, and there are two tabs specifically that I think are a great place to start, which for us and Logan, maybe you mentioned this too for yours. We have like an overview tab and it just has like the basic timeline. I'm talking like 5 cells. That's like event start, event ends, and just like some little things in between, which you can usually identify from one of your first meetings, whether the event has happened before or not. People usually have an idea of what they want. So you just like kind of basically fill them out like the smallest, little, easiest timeline ever, like right there. And then the other tab is like we have a logistics tab where you can put the date in, the location, which, like we said, in most cases, you will probably know this information by the time you get started. The goals, which we know you'll know because you've already started with why and you found your North Star. And then you can put in the audience, which once again, you'll most likely know if this event has already been like an idea. People usually know who they want to come. And then in your meetings, you start learning about elements of the event, things that people want. And so we just kind of try to drop stuff in there because things get mentioned so often, like little things that they want to be a part of it, that you can start tracking that immediately. The rest of the workbook, like kind of as Logan was saying, kind of can come with time. But those are some things that you can start from, I think, your very first meeting, which is going to help you track. So those are definitely some good places to start. And we've kind of started talking about a benefit of a timeline or a work back schedule. But if we can get into it a little bit more specifically, Logan, when have you seen the benefit of the timeline and work back schedules, and how do you find them to be utilized best?
Yeah, work back schedule essentially means, that you're working backwards from your event date. And so that's the other part with event planning that can feel overwhelming sometimes is time is not necessarily your friend. You're going to realize that, things come up faster than you realize. So being able to work backwards is let's start with where we want to finish and then backtrack for everything we think that we need to get done in certain timelines. And so a work back schedule can be really helpful if you are someone that is planning an event that involves multiple departments, meaning many different people, or maybe you're planning an event that involves a committee. So anything where there's multiple people. So that's why I think now that I've kind of sunset that personally for me, because a lot of my project management I do is just for myself. But when I have things, having a work back schedule that is client facing, the event person is seeing it, you're seeing it, kind of keeps everybody on track with deadlines. Because I don't know about you, Mary, but I've definitely been a part of events where we start talking 8 months out and then I feel like we blink and it's 2 months out and all we've done is talk about what we want and, this would be great. And then we have, tasks for people to do and all of a sudden they get push. Someone's like, oh, I didn't get to it this month. I'll get to it next month. And all of a sudden it's like, we're 2 months out and we don't have these key details confirmed. And so your work back schedule is great to have those milestones of like, this is our drop dead. And we did this for the conference. We were like, this is our drop dead. Yes or no, are we having this event? This is our drop dead of like, we have to launch registration by this time. That simple task is going to have other tasks that come off of that of like, that means you need your marketing materials. That means you need your registration set up. Like it is a nice way to visually see all the tasks and things that go into your event. And it can be either super high level with just like your 2 milestones for each of your committees or your subgroups, or it can get super granular to being like, we are posting on Monday. We are sending this email on Tuesday. And that can all live in one schedule. How about you, Mary? What are some other things that are typical for you?
I'm really glad that you pointed that out. I think like as if you're listening to this and you're hearing this and any of it feels overwhelming, if I could just re-stress what Logan said, that if you have your work back schedule or timeline, like your mind will be so much more at ease. And so if you're really thinking through, oh, what do you do next? Sit down and make that thing. And if you haven't before, it might take you a couple hours. Like it can take some time for sure. But like do it and oh my gosh, you're going to have so much sanity. Like I'm stressing out just thinking about not having it. So if you don't, this is your call to action to go make one. It'll save you probably a lot of stress. But like Logan said, yes, they are best utilized when everyone uses them. And that I think is one of my biggest pet peeves about these. I think at a minimum, you need the planning team to all use it and like be updating it. But I do think there is like someone who kind of has to be assigned to have oversight on the whole thing because people forget. And so it's that person who's pushing them to remember to update the timeline, blah, 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 all of that. But, there's just been so many instances, I would say more than not, when like our clients aren't using the timeline, even though from the very beginning they've said they want it, that it's important. We remind them every meeting and they still don't. So I'm not going to die on that hill, but we are going to use it. And it certainly helps us. So, yeah, that's what I would add to that.
Well, Mary, is there anything that you've learned the hard way where you were like, dang, I should have done that sooner when we're talking about event strategy and, this key decision that you're making after you figured out your North Star and your why?
Yeah, definitely. I would say this happens a lot. So even though I have a schedule, like we said, per event, they can vary. And especially like Logan said, it's like you start off kind of chill, and then next thing you know, you're like, crap, we should have been working on all those things. So in that instance, it usually has to do with something venue related or like rental related, anything that you really need to get like a date on there for. For example, like you have your venue, you have the date, like you're all good there, you've been connected to them, but you need to start reserving maybe tables and chairs if they don't have it or just like things like that. And that is something I always put off for a few reasons, mostly because like we need accurate attendee counts to be able to order the right thing. But those types of things can book out during busy seasons. And so that I think we just wait way much to the last minute. Like that can be something that like can happen at least a little sooner, getting the quote initiated. Finalizing floor plans takes forever. I think that we could do it sooner. Honestly, I think it's like a continuous thing that is always edited up until event day. But to have something we can like perceive a lot of things after a walkthrough, and to be able to just like have something pretty concrete and we're just tweaking it like as soon as you do the walkthrough, I think is something where I'm like, yeah, we can check that off sooner. And then I also will say, oh, two more, Logan, you're going to appreciate these. Creating a run of show, like a production run of show. You can email us for a run of show template, like the actual production run of show. Once again, that changes a lot over time, but it does usually seem like a little bit of a scramble to put it together, which prompts a lot of really important questions you should be asking about the program. So I do think starting it sooner than later is good. And then my last one, obviously there's a lot, is asset collection. So getting all those PowerPoints, um, any graphics, all of those things, the scripts, all of those things, which is impacted by other people typically, but those are all pain points for me in a timeline of things that I wish that we could have started sooner. Logan, what would you add?
I think my main one is your time on site, because it's something from a production perspective of like, what time do you get access to the venue? What kind of AV setup do you want? So how long is that going to take to load in, and how much rehearsal time do you want with your speakers before doors open? So we talked about this big work back schedule you have, but you also kind of need to make a micro work back for just your access on site or even virtually. Virtual is a little easier because when you're on site, Mary and I have been a part of a show where we don't get access till a specific time of day, even though we wanted it earlier because there's another event in that physical space. When you're doing virtual and you're in Zoom or YouTube or something, you're not waiting for someone else to get out of there so you can get set up. So I haven't stressed this as much virtually, but in person, it's one of those things that early on you figured out your why, you're starting to figure out your date and your venue. If you're doing a really like big production, you really need to bring in your production vendor pretty quickly so you can understand the budget implications of what days you have access, what times you have access to. I had a project recently where we lost a whole rehearsal day because, again, at the end of the day, I think the client wanted to save money and not have the space for one additional day, but no one had really thought through the implications for the speakers, because it still takes X amount of time to load things in, to set up microphones, to set up speakers. You're doing any kind of rigging where things are hung from the ceiling, that takes so much more time. So working backward from that so that you figure out what your time is you need, and then that timing usually implicates budget for overtime, even double time for some vendors and things. And those numbers can add up quick. And I find we usually don't realize that till pretty closer to much closer to the event. So that's just something, if budget is a priority, getting that conversation about on-site work back time is so crucial.
I love that you said that, because there have been moments when we have gotten a little bit like screwed over on our scopes because someone will add on like an hour to the venue load in time. And I'm like, that's like an hour extra for 3 staff members that like actually adds up. And I was not planning on that. Wish I would have known like those conversations sooner. There's a lot that, that could go into that to mitigate that. But love that you said that. As far as any other like tips and tricks regarding this, the one other thing that I was thinking is just to encourage you all that are listening to think about what can be done now and do it. Like try to front load as much as you can. Literally sit down, look at your whole work back schedule or timeline and figure out like what do you have the ability to do now. Like I said, as soon as you do a walkthrough, you can start creating the floor plan. So just do it. Because I think, as we all know, as the event gets closer, things just get crazier. And I am a classic procrastinator. So I have learned this the hard way so many times. So I have to really consciously keep telling myself, what can we do now while we're not as busy? And we have to either start it or do it. I'm not saying you have to touch it a million times, but like start what you can because there are things that you can start immediately.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think my reframe that's been really helpful is that I think of future me as somebody else. They're separate from current me, and I want to help out future me. I'm trying to, anything I can do today to help out future me, I should be doing today. And this is especially important for what I do with production, especially as we get closer to on site. Whatever prep I can do before I'm physically on site or even the night prior or whatever it is, that's just going to help out tomorrow me. And that can be as simple as even like printing documents. If you are someone who's had to print on site, you've probably fought with a printer in your day. Like, take that stress away from the event day, do it the night before, fight with the printer the night before or the day before on load in. So just thinking about future me, like Mary said, what can you help future you out with as a planner, as the event host? And then also that work back schedule is really helpful again for teams. And, with teams comes different personalities, and you'll start to learn if you've worked with these people before, what folks on your team are procrastinators and what are those that are going to do it right when you tell them. And so just getting those deadlines on their radar sooner and sooner. Mary, you mentioned assets. I feel like sometimes with creative and marketing, you know, they get the short end of the stick sometimes because they're the things coming in late, but they often rely on the speakers or these other people to give them information to do what they need to do. And so just letting everybody know, hey, the deadline for this is, August 15th. So telling them that in June, reiterating it end of June, reiterating it beginning of July. Like as an event planner, it's a lot of, and producer, a lot of it is just reminding people that things need to happen, and asking what's helpful for them. Do they want you to be checking in with them every couple weeks? If it's a more complex asset like lower thirds or some fancy video that we're doing on LED boards, we'll often say, hey, show us a first draft. So yeah, just starting to think about how you work with the people that you're working with to make sure you're setting everybody up for success, because I feel like, again, event planning can get out of hand really quickly, but doing some of these key strategies we mentioned will help, reduce that stress.
I love it. I hope that this was helpful for everyone who's listening. Either you might have a process or you're new to this process, but hopefully that there is something that you can take away and improve where you start your event planning process. So thank you so much, everyone. And Logan, I'm going to pass it back to you for our bonus tip for today.
Yeah, this week's bonus tip is for you if you are attending a conference or an event, which I hope you do as an event pro. I feel like I did a bonus tip a long time ago saying it's really helpful as an event planner to actually attend events and experience things from the attendee perspective. But my tip for you is next time you attend a conference or an event, wear something that makes you feel good, and bonus points if it's something bright. I know we all love to wear black as an event pros. That's what, if I'm on site working, I'm going to be wearing all black, usually trying to blend in with the background. But my pro tip for you as an attendee is, because not only are you going to feel confident if you're wearing something that makes you feel good, but if it is something that's brighter, because I experienced this at a conference I went to, it makes you easier to spot people once they meet you and introduce themselves to you or their old friends. They then, like, I wore like a sparkly blazer to this conference I went to. And I laughed because halfway through the day, I realized I didn't have to go find people. They found me, because once they figured I was wearing a sparkly blazer, I was very easy to find in this crowd of people. So I'm going to shout out Rent the Runway. I know, Mary, you've tried it a bit, but it's become my go-to for personal events. And then I've had the monthly subscription. So I started using it now for professional events I go to. And it's been just really fun. I'm much more colorful and funky with my rental style. And little did I know, it started to help me as a networking tool.
That's a wonderful tip. I love it. And I do love Rent the Runway as well. So I can second that for sure. Thanks so much, Logan, for that bonus tip. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can also check out our private community, and there's information on that as a reminder in the show notes. We'd love to have you join us there. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com, and you can also connect with Logan and I directly on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for listening to another week of the podcast. We'll see you again next Wednesday.